Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today, Signals, a Literacy and Essential Skills Screening Tool. My name is Alison Mull and I'm the Manager of Communications and Marketing here at the Ontario Literacy Coalition. Before we get started, I just want to give you a few instructions. At the right-hand side of your screen is your dashboard. There you can chat with each other in the chat pane and ask questions in the question pane. If it's a technical question, I'll try to answer it throughout the webinar and assist you. If it's a question pertaining to the topic, feel free to ask at any time, but John will be addressing questions at the end of the webinar. And if you'd like to participate on Twitter, just use the hashtag OLCWeb. Before we get started, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the Ontario Network of Employment Skills Training Projects, or OneStep, for helping us co-host this webinar and helping promote it. We at the OLC are committed to making stronger connections between the employment and literacy communities. So thank you to OneStep for recognizing the importance of raising awareness of this screening tool with the employment community. Now to introduce our presenter. John MacLaughlin is the Manager of Program Business and Partnership Development here at the Ontario Literacy Coalition. John has a long and distinguished career in the literacy field, both in Canada and internationally. He was the founding executive director of Preparatory Training Program, or PTP. That's one of the largest community-based literacy programs in Ontario. He helped develop, initiate and manage Metro Toronto Movement for Literacy's Information and Referral Service for Literacy and ESL, and was a founding board member of the Ontario Literacy Coalition. And currently at the OLC, John is leading a number of initiatives and applied research related to labor market development, effective program design, performance improvement, and accountability. Okay, so take it away, John.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. First off, I'm just finishing a very large report about technology and its effects on the workplace, and this is my very first time, and I'm realizing about the technological disadvantage I may be at, but it's very exciting. The concept behind the piece of work that we've been pulling together over the past 12 months, it came from a presentation I made, actually, and I'm glad that this is being sort of co-hosted by OneStep. 2 years ago, I was presenting the findings of a sort of a rather broad-ranging topic at a OneStep conference and to employment counselors across the province. And at the end of the presentation, people sort of like had rather nice things to say, nothing particularly specific. But one person at the back of the room stood up and said, "Why doesn't the Ontario Literacy Coalition develop a screening tool so that we know who of our clients might benefit from a basic skills program? Do something useful." Well, this was my attempt to actually try and pull together something that was useful and that would have meaning not just for the literacy and essential skills community, but for employment counselors. So what we then proceeded to do was examine what was available not just across Ontario and the rest of Canada, but what was being used by employment one-stop centers across many different jurisdictions in order to facilitate the process of moving potential clients into basic skills programs in a fairly easy and fluid manner, right? Because it's not just an Ontario challenge over the years, but many jurisdictions have run across the problems as they started to merge literacy, basic skills, English second language with employment services to try and ascertain what clients would benefit, right? And of course, in Ontario, many programs can provide a full-scale assessment that provides a fair amount of diagnostic information. But often these assessments were long, perhaps took a lot of commitment on behalf of the client and the employment counselor in order to interpret those things. So we looked not only to Ontario, but elsewhere to try and see what was out there and that might be usable within the context of employment counselors, be they in Employment Ontario, Ontario Works, WSIB, or ODSP. Right? And what we saw is that there was no quick, reliable, or accessible tool that really on a consistent basis across the province could help them inform whether their clients would actually benefit from literacy and basic skills. So we examined, how do employment counselors know when referral to an LBS or ESL program might be appropriate? Right? We then looked at what kind of tool will help employment counselors and their clients. Well, after many discussions, we thought that it would be a tool that would have to be quick and non-threatening to administer, right? So that it couldn't account for a large amount of time that the client would have to take to find out, basically where their skills reside. We also heard that it would have to be non-threatening, i.e., that it would have to be something that wouldn't be a high-stakes game, that there wouldn't be a punishment or a challenge because someone didn't do well on that assessment. We heard that it would need to provide immediate scoring. Now, of course, immediate is a word that can have many connotations, but our sense was that it would need to provide scoring either that day or shortly thereafter. Sorry, I'm having a drink of coffee. That since we understand the complexity that an employment counselor in an EO agency or in Ontario Works has to do, the full range of activities, and the number of tools that they have to manage in terms of evaluating where client skills reside, that it would have to not involve a lot of training to administer on part of the EO agency, and that it would have to fit into the overall context of the center. That it would have to provide a choice of reliable and user-friendly approaches for the identification of literacy, essential skills, and language needs. Right? We also heard that it was really important that you don't just get a screening tool that can find out if someone would benefit from a program or not, but that there would need to be regional or local mechanisms that would be put in place so that a counselor would know how, when, and where to refer the client if they might benefit from programming. So what we ended up with, we understood that employment counselors required a tool that assists them with the most vulnerable clients, whether you call them vulnerable, disadvantaged, hard to serve, those without a high school diploma, a tool that will help them to provide meaningful counsel and referral to the appropriate service, and also give the client an understanding of where their skills may reside against the kinds of employment goals that they might have. So during the process of development, we looked quite closely at the Fast Track system in the United Kingdom, right? And Fast Track started about 10 years ago, and it was designed as a simple computer-based screening tool to identify those that have low literacy and numeracy skills who might benefit from literacy or language training, right? Currently, similar tools exist in Australia, and there's one being developed in New Zealand. Right? And what did they find out after they implemented Fast Track? The number of referrals increased to basic skills programs, the Skills for Life initiative, throughout the United Kingdom. Right? They also found that the number of accurate referrals increased dramatically. And Fast Track is available in two formats, in handwritten version, paper and pen-based, and an online. For the most part, as of last year, almost all of the assessments had moved to online assessments because, in fact, the online assessment was not only easier to operate for the one-stop centers, but also were more accurate in terms of their referrals. So when we really started to develop the program, as is always a good thing, we decided not to reinvent the wheel. Federally, the Human Resource Development Canada had been funding a project called TAOS Prime. And TAOS Prime is an online assessment that provides a suite of web-based products developed to provide accurate assessment and relevant instruction that results in measurable improvement of literacy skills. It has individual assessments that tasks mimic authentic and individual interactions with stimuli encountered in non-testing settings. And by the way, I'm not sure what all of that means, but I know, generally speaking, that it does a good job, or during its beta testing, about finding out where someone's skills reside based against a variety of data and skills. And it provides access to a very large compendium of test items developed from workplaces. So the TAOS Prime is a suite of a variety of tools, of which Signals, which is an Ontario-based and will be locally run, is going to use as many of the same test items, but uses logarithms to move the potential learner through the assessment in a timely and effective manner. Right. So at the end of the day, the features of Signals are it will estimate skills in prose and document literacy, numeracy, reading, and in 2013, it will also provide estimated skills in oral fluency. It will report scales and proficiency levels linked to the IELTS 500-point scale and essential skills proficiency levels. One of the great features about it is the score reporting is immediate and can provide reliable information very quickly. Now, once again, it's the way in which it measures are fairly accurate, but not for the level of testing. That it just provides some guidance as to what someone's level is. It's not a high-stakes game. And in 2013, programs will be able to brand it and adapt it to regional needs. And that the results will be able to be linked to NOC codes. Right? For those of you who aren't familiar with those, although I expect many of you are, they're National Occupation Classifications codes, and they are measured. So those are measured against the different essential skills levels in prose, numeracy, reading, and oral fluency. So it will, once again, not with a great degree of accuracy, but in the same ballpark, give you an understanding, is the client have the kinds of skills that would be required for those jobs if we moved outside of any form of credentialization. So as we've moved through the beta testing, the time to complete is approximately 12 to 17 minutes. Right? Which, by the way, is very similar to the amount of time in the UK that they've got it down to about 10 minutes. Our time will shorten as the system learns more about the likely skills of different groups. It's an easy-to-use computerized system, and a paper-based version of it will be available in 2013. It manages to do this by utilizing a complex series of logarithms that assign assessment tasks. So if someone, they'll start off with an assessment item that is lower scaled, will move up to something that is higher scaled, and the computer system will then target where someone's skills reside and then give them several more questions just to ascertain that they are at that level. And as I keep mentioning, it's a form of low-stakes assessment and does not replicate what a program may do in terms of intake or any form of diagnostic assessment or in terms of placement in the program. Online support and training will be available. It is available in both official languages, and in 2013, it will be available in other languages as well. I think approximately 8 languages that are fairly common throughout the province of Ontario. So if you went today to the tool, this is what the opening page would look like. And at this particular juncture, I'm going to pass the microphone, if there was one, to Gazelle, who'll walk through the assessment task.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give a quick overview of a few samples of the questions that are going to be on the test or on the assessment tool. It's important to note that the questions that we are going to look at right now are not the questions that are going to be on the test or in the tutorial, but rather similar questions, because we're doing this because the questions that are on the test, we're not trying to make them public. They have been tested and validated, and it's too soon for them to be public. They might lose part of their ability, novelty for the people who are going to be using them. This is one of the sample questions during the tutorial portion of the test, where we get to orient the learner to using the computer tool to go through the questions later on. So in this question, question number 1, the learner is asked to highlight the appropriate answer. And this is what it would look like when STEP completed it. This is a second tutorial question that gets the learner used to using the number keypad. This one is a question that a client might see during the test. Of course, this is not a real question that's on the test because, as I said before, we don't want it to lose its newness once it's part of the test, once it becomes part of the test. But here's a sample of where the client would be asked to highlight something. This is a similar question, another example. The learners, as you can see on the left hand, I keep calling the learner, but their client, on the left-hand side, you can see they have the option of erasing a wrong answer and redoing it if they're not confident with what they've answered in the first place. Another example in French. Those of you who read French, I'm sure know what this means, but I'll leave it to you. Once again, it's another area where a client would be asked to highlight the right answer on the left-hand side. Okay, I'm going to give it back to John.
So part of as to say the goal is, since we know the entire employment Ontario system is going to be evaluated in terms of how we're able to make the system more synthetic for the customer or client. And what we believe is that signals will contribute to building the bridge between the LBS programs, which are fairly robust in nature across the province, and the wide range of employment services. Right? And as part of that, it requires wraparound information and referral support. information sharing at all levels, right? Is that what we found when I've been working in certain regions, although for myself mostly in Toronto, is that when a more robust understanding of what clients are in employment services might benefit, it actually starts conversation about the kind of clients who programs may be seeing now, but the ones who they may be seeing in the future as well. It provides a bit of a guideline around what are clients' aspirations, what are the kinds of employment they're looking for, and start those kinds of conversations in more detail, right? Also, it's part of an overall commitment around data sharing, and we think many of us who are working within the context of the Employment Ontario Information System and whatever emerges out of community and social services will start to help us map out and understand better where the skills in our communities reside from employment seekers. And while the system will not record individual data, it will record aggregate data. So while, you know, Gazelle and myself sitting here on 65 Wellesley Street, we'd never be able to see an individual client's data. At a particular point, about in 2013, we'll start to see some of the aggregate data within the system to understand not only just how many times the screening tool has been used and used effectively, but we'll start to also see, well, where do people's skills reside of those, and what are some of their goal options, what are they looking at? We'll get a better sense of those things from an Ontario jurisdictional viewpoint. And by the way, this has been one of the great pieces around planning that came out of the UK system, that they were actually able to do overall system planning by having a better understanding of employment seekers and their literacy and language desires. Right? So before I pass it over to ask some questions, the beta version, as we look here, we just received. Right? And so it has gone through its initial testings finally. Sort of been a little bit like waiting for Godot. The computerized programs and the logarithms have been somewhat more difficult to do than I think the folks at Bow Valley College had thought, but it has finally been fully developed. We're going to be doing field trials in March and April of this coming year. It will be available to communities for piloting sometime this April, right? And we'll be looking to a variety of communities, whether it's through regional networks or with Employment Ontario centers, to do piloting probably in 10 to 15 sites. We would like to see it used broadly across the Ontario system by April 2013. We will obviously be making adjustments over the course of the coming year. Also in terms of not just about the test items, because frankly most of that was covered off during the beta trials. But what we'll be looking for is, does it work within the context of an Employment Ontario employment service or an Ontario Works office, and does it meet not only the needs of employment counselors, but does it meet the needs of the clients? We also will want to know, did the clients actually end up in a program? Did this help facilitate that process? And were those accurate? Right? Which is very critical, because we want to, while we know that the scoring is correct, we want to get feedback from programs in Employment Ontario as to, were they actually the right kinds of clients beyond just the literacy skills for programs overall. Right? And now we move on to the fun-filled questions and discussion. Although I'd like to ask you guys questions, but I don't think Allison's going to let me.
No, I am not. Okay, we have a few questions here to ask you, John. The first one is, any chance that there will be a correlation to OALCF levels 1, 2, 3?
Yes. I would fully expect that since there are correlations between the OALCF levels and IELTS and the essential skills, that while you wouldn't end up with a score that would be, what would I sort of describe it, ironclad in terms of what their OALCF level would be, it would certainly give you an indication of where their skills reside within the context of the OALCF. Once again, I would not expect that it would replace the intake assessment of a program, but it would probably give the program and the client at least a bit of an understanding before they go to the program where along the OALCF, where along that particular continuum they might fall.
Okay, great. Another question, is there a cost for the tool?
There is no cost. And we don't expect that there would be any cost, barring something unforeseen, until perhaps 2014. And then only if there was that the assessment needed to be revised or supported and there was no government funding to do so.
Okay, great. Next one, are instructions provided online through audio? If yes, will they be captured or offered in visual language, sign language?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about, currently I haven't seen that the instructions are in audio or that the assessment has been guided to that particular element, but it's a question I'll take forward to the test developers as we move forward through 2013.
Okay, great. What are the requirements or individual facilitator qualifications to deliver pilot versions of Signals?
Well, as we move into a more substantive piloting stage, we have a number of things that we'll be looking at in terms of creating a rubric about where it will be piloted. We want to make sure that it's piloted in both rural and urban settings, that it's piloted in an area that has, how should I describe this, access to potential students or clients from a broad range of diverse backgrounds, basically that it reflects the nature of Ontario. Also, we are currently examining the size, right? So we want to look at piloting it in both smaller Employment Ontario centers, larger Employment Ontario centers, and also those that serve special needs or have particular focus group of clients that they may be serving.
Okay, great. Was this done with culturally relevant data, for instance, the Aboriginal communities?
Can you repeat that, Allison?
The question is, was this done with culturally relevant data, for example, for the Aboriginal communities?
The assessment itself is supposed to be neutral, or is designed to be neutral in terms of any cultural biases. The test that was originally developed, all the test items have been run through thousands and thousands of both clients and potential learners, and it's been, in terms of its results and its triangulation, is that it has been designed not to show any cultural biases. So while it hasn't been designed specifically for any particular group, it has been designed not to exclude any particular group.
Okay, great. So some networks have assessment contracts with Employment Services NOW. Will this replace that?
I would obviously that this particular tool is not designed to replace anything. It is there to augment whatever is either out there or to provide an option for Employment Ontario centers or Ontario Works offices that are looking to develop something that isn't agency specific, that would provide sort of a broad range of opportunities, right? It's intended as something that is quick and reliable, not to replace full assessment or whatever agreements that may exist between any existing Employment Ontario services.
Okay, how will you track outcomes, for instance, where the client went and how good a fit the referral was, or will this be done or captured within EOIS?
This tool is not part of the Employment Ontario information system, and so the data will not be captured on EOIS, but as we move forward, we will start to ask programs who both are piloting it and during the next stages of its development to capture that information. And we have a fairly simple form that will be going out with the online form that captures that sort of information, right? That would require nothing particularly onerous on behalf of the agency, just some simple check marks. We're not looking at something in tremendous detail, but data that is accurate and just simple to fill out.
Okay, I have a few questions here about whether the tool will be available in other provinces or whether the tool will be easily adapted to be used in other provinces.
The Ontario Literacy Coalition works in Ontario, and we've designed this tool and we're funded for this particular, it almost sounds awful, this set of logarithms to be specific to Ontario. Once again, because the assessment is neutral, or the screening tool is neutral in nature, I would be uncertain why it wouldn't be usable across provinces in Canada. However, that goes beyond the scope and perhaps interest of the Ontario Literacy Coalition, but is certainly something that we could explore with other provincial bodies and other provincial coalitions.
Okay, have Employment Ontario counselors been made aware of this tool?
We've done a number of presentations over the past year to let people know that this is in place, and we've had conversations, discussions, key informant interviews with a range of employment and counselors across Ontario to get their viewpoints about what would work.
Okay. And to follow up with that, how will people know when the tool is available?
The people will know when the tool is available if they, I think we plan on working closely with One Step to disseminate information across the system, given that the Ontario Literacy Coalition works with practitioners and programs across the province. We've not always worked entirely closely with employment services. We're looking at strengthening that relationship, and we're primarily going to be doing that through One Step and organizations that we currently know to broaden our horizons in terms of that, right? So it will be a step-by-step process, obviously via our new website coming up on April 1st. People will be able to access information, but we will attempt in conjunction with our partners to disseminate the information as widely as possible after the piloting stage.
Okay, there's a lot of questions here. I'm trying to sort my way through them. So apologies if I missed yours. We'll try to get to them all. Has there been any discussion about applications for use with learners wanting to register for high school credit classes who may better served by additional support in LBS programming?
I think I can answer that very simply. No. It obviously one might explore it for that purpose, but that was not the intention of the design of the program. That, to me, seems like something that an employment counselor would have to explore with the client. They might be able to use this tool for that, but I mean, that's probably what I often like to think is going inside the black box in terms of what the tool might or might not do.
Is Signals designed for use primarily at EO offices?
It is designed specifically for use with employment counselors that would fit within the context of an Employment Ontario Center or an Ontario Works office as well, right? I think we have or at least I do, have a reasonable understanding about the roles and responsibilities of employment counselors, job placement officers, etc. And it is designed with that job and those areas of responsibilities in mind. As with the fast track system in the UK, it is really quite simple to use within the context of any environment and is adaptable as long as the computer is available, and by 2013 as long as pen and paper is available as well.
And will it be available to academic upgrading programs throughout the province?
Yeah. One of the things I want to make really clear, just because I get a sense of some of these questions, it is not designed for a basic skills program itself. So for an LBS program or an academic upgrading program, I'm not sure that they would see any particular benefits from using a tool like this when most programs, if not all programs, have fairly robust internal assessments already. This is for an employment counselor or someone intermediary who is dealing with a client who would like to know where their skills reside. Right? It wouldn't tell someone where or what level the client who actually is in a program, where their skills actually might reside within that particular program. Right? It is not a full-scale assessment, nor would one expect that it would do so in 10 minutes.
Okay. The tutorial examples that were shown require some level of comfort with computers and some ability to read English. If a client speaks English as an additional language fairly well but is not able to complete the basic questions, will the Signals tool be able to indicate whether the client is best suited for ESL or literacy?
Okay. I think there were several questions there. Maybe, Allison, can I get you to say the first part again? Because I think there was two questions there. And my short-term memory is shot. Those 70s just did a riot with my brain.
Okay, well, basically they're asking if the Signals tool will be able to indicate whether the client is best suited for ESL literacy. For example, with a client who may be well-spoken in English but not able to complete the basic questions.
Right. Actually, okay, now I understand. All right. So there's a number of ways, and of course we're wading into an area which crosses a number of funding jurisdictions. During the development of this assessment, we're aware that the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration is also going through some piloting of their new CLARS assessment centers, and we're respectful of that. By 2013, the assessment will be available in a variety of languages so that you would be able to ascertain where someone's skills reside against their first language, right? But as of this April, the system won't have that capacity, and I don't think that we want to make sure that we have the English and French versions correct first. There is an oral fluency piece that is available with a larger assessment that would roughly place someone against the Canadian language benchmark. And we'll, but as I say, in terms of Ontario, at this particular juncture, that's not an area that we'll be visiting this year. I think if actually I can remember another one of the things that Allison, part of that question was, does having the assessment on a computer interfere with the score? Right? During the process of validating the tool, and in fact of the entire prime set suite of tools, they have not seen any differences between how an individual scores on a computer assessment and the paper-based assessment. Right? So most people are very familiar, although there's the odd person who isn't, with operating a mouse. And in fact, you're likely, because of the aging demographics, more and more people are actually more familiar with moving around a computer screen than they are actually with a pen and a paper. Having said all of that, over the course of this year, we're really piloting the computer-based tool, right, and looking at the accuracy thereof for that particular tool. And I will also note, I know because this was one of my things as well, is you know, can you really design a computerized assessment that someone who is unfamiliar with a computer is actually going to score the same as they would on a paper and pen-based assessment? And in fact, if you go to the UK fast track system, is the computer-based system actually ended up providing far more accurate scoring than the pen and paper-based version, partly because of time lag in getting the scorings, time lag in terms of interpreting the results, and also there's the key word. Often, while we don't always like to admit this, that the logarithms in a computer are slightly more unbiased than an individual who's marking them on a desk.
Okay. Can you explain what you mean by being able to adapt and brand the tool?
Right. I would go back to one of my early slides, which says the intel inside. Right? So what our system, so in the province of Ontario, we are tapping into a large bank of test, the large bank of test items. And so basically we are importing those online into Ontario. Now the system, because of the way in which it's designed, allows for a variety of splash pages. So a system could be, so it can have as many splash pages as we want it to, right? So it can reside, there can be a splash page for example, if we decided, well, let's just pretend I won't pick on any area in Ontario, but let's say I was in Connecticut. I could actually brand the page, John's excellent Connecticut-based, you know, employment program. And that splash page will come up, and it's that splash page that then just links into those test items. So it's really just, how it's packaged on the outside. The client and the employment counselor won't necessarily see inside the computer, inside the computerized system. All they see is the splash page and the way in which it is branded.
Okay, great. This may have already been covered, but just to reinforce, what competencies, essential skills are being covered in this tool?
Well, We almost have to like go back in terms of it evaluates or measures someone's skills against prose and document literacy, numeracy, reading, and optionally, come 2013, floral, I was going to say floral competence, no, oral fluency. Right? Most of the test items are employment or workplace based. Right? So they replicate the kinds of skills that one would encounter in an employment setting. Part of the reasoning behind that was that this tool is intended for clients who are employment bound.
Okay. Assume this tool cannot be used as a diagnostic. In other words, it doesn't provide the basis for developing a prescriptive training program. Is this correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. We have a question to refer back to the LBS thing. So should LBS agencies consider this tool for any reason?
I think it's good that they would be aware of it, but I would not expect that it would replace any particular tool that they are using themselves. I think it might provide a point of contact for an Employment Ontario Center. However, my expectations would be that that would be more likely and better able to be facilitated through the Regional Literacy Network.
Okay. If used in a localized community, can the background data, reusage effectiveness, etc., be aggregated to show that just this population profile? That would be useful for planning purposes.
Yes. Once again, depending on if a region wanted to collect that information, as long as it didn't trespass the rights of an individual client in the EO Center, if the information is aggregate and is going to be used for those purposes, I think that any information is good information in terms of planning for the client, right, and groups of clients in our communities to develop better understandings of the kinds of employment that they're looking for, the kinds of employment ultimately that they get into, and those clients and their characteristics that best suit particular types of programs. It's all good.
Okay. We have a comment here. I'm not sure I understand why this will be available in languages other than English and French. Would that be for referral to an ESL program?
So yes, and I will refer back to one of the earlier questions where someone was saying, how would I know if it was a first language problem, right, that they, what their skills would be like, whether this is an ESL literacy question or an ESL question. Ultimately, if you were able to provide an assessment in someone's first language, right, then this will give you a far better understanding of whether it's a literacy issue or an ESL issue, right? That would be the primary reason for doing that. It is one more piece of investigation that maybe an employment counselor doesn't want to do, and I would understand that. But if it is available, and if someone wants to use it in terms of being able to clearly delineate between those two streams, right? One of the things we know is, right, and this is a long-standing piece of information, is that the better the first referral is, the more likely the client is to end up in that next stage of their own personal development, right? That without solid information and referral, clients, and particularly those who are the most vulnerable, those who have the most issues, don't end up in the next stage, right? We know this from studies that were conducted in the 90s and the early 2000s, right, where so many clients just seem to disappear through the cracks of the system, right? One of my long-standing lines of inquiry for myself is what happens to those clients and how do we facilitate quicker, better, and more accurate referrals into the right place at the right time, right? As a system, we've not always done a fantastic job of that, right? Some areas have, some agencies to agencies have, but systematically, we've not done as well as we always could.
Okay, if a client is referred to an LBS program using this tool, is the LBS program able to view the results?
That's up to the client only, right? If a client decides that they want to have that information, first off, the client does get the information, and if they decide that they want to show it to the LBS program, that's up to the client or potential learner. A tool itself cannot answer that, right? I'm assuming an employment counselor might counsel a client to bring that information, but I think it would be beyond their jurisdiction to be able to demand that a client would do that.
Okay. We have questions about how programs can become part of the pilot. So who could they talk to you about that, and who from an employment program would usually come to you?
Anyone can come to either myself, John MacLaughlin, I think my email, or Allison, you can provide it, or to Gazelle, who is the project lead on this, and make her email. She's far more astute and able than I am to be able to deal with all these things, but she has a chart going of every location that's demonstrated interest. And anyone in an employment center, if they want to get in contact with us, that's cool. I won't stand on protocol.
Okay, great. Do you see any use of this tool by non-EO professionals? I'm thinking of possible uses for health professionals that may be looking for additional supports for their clients.
I think that our first goal was Employment Ontario, and of course over about the last 4 months I've gotten a lot of interest from Ontario Works. That was our sort of first groupings of folks to make it aware of and understand the purposes of the tool. I think then our next step after that is to analyze, are there other intermediaries and their clients who would actually benefit from having timely and accurate referrals into the LBS system? And I think the answer to that is yes. I'm also aware of sort of our capacity. This was a very small grant from Employment Ontario. We managed to link it up with some of the Ontario Literacy Coalition's own funds and through other initiatives being run federally. So we're aware of our capacity to support the tool in the upcoming year, but we're very open to making sure that it gets out there and is used for the right purposes.
Okay, just a comment here. The aggregate data could be useful for business planning purposes. Literacy networks could reference their learner profiles to support their case for planned initiatives. Also, that data may be useful for local workforce training boards. Agree?
Am I to make a comment, Allison, or?
You can comment on that comment.
Oh, am I allowed to just go agree? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in its ideal form, that's exactly what you want. Right? However, I'm careful always now not to overpromise. Things are never as simple as you've seen. I thought I was getting this. It all seemed wonderful and easy to do. I'm not always someone who entirely understands the issues of test validity and reliability. But this has been actually quite a slog. And I think we're rather relieved on Friday and early this morning when the tool had completed its beta testing. So I'm not trying to overpromise, but I think over the next several months our house is in order and we'll be moving forward to it. And And then it's up to a regional network to determine what and for what purposes it suits them. Right?
Okay, great. That seems to be all the questions right for now. I apologize if I didn't get to someone's questions. There were quite a few to go through. I tried to address all the issues that were raised. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, OneStep.
Allison, if someone has a specific question about anything today, they can email it to me at john@on.literacy.ca. Normally, I always promise I'll get back to people as quickly as I can. I have to caution patience. I'm finishing up a huge report going to the federal government, but I will try and get back to people as quickly as I can. If they have specific questions about something in particular, I'll try and do the best I can. And if I can't answer the question, I'll find out who can answer it to the person's best to their satisfaction.
Okay, that sounds great. There's also our general email, olc@on.literacy.ca. You can email and we'll make sure it gets to John and the right person. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and thank you, John.